Hello. Welcome. Happy Eclipse. This morning at around 5 a.m. Mountain Time, which is where I am in Denver, adjust for your time zone, was the annular solar eclipse in Gemini. That means that, hi Tanya, there's a total solar eclipse. You could see it in some places of the world. I think it was complete high, mostly over like Greenland and that scope of Canada. So I'm not sure how many of you were able to see that. Hi Ashley, hi Lucy. Very happy to see you guys. So big eclipse today. Eclipses always come in pairs. There's always at least a lunar and at least a solar, but sometimes you can get more than one lunar or solar. Like last year we had 5 eclipses during the summer eclipse season. So regardless of how many we have, they're always a big deal because it means that the sun and the moon are meeting at the same place in the sky, and they're meeting at the place of their ecliptic around the earth. And that's also where the nodes of fate are in astrology. So they're referred to as the lunar nodes. But those are really important places in our chart. If you know anything about the north node and the south node, your north node is where you're meant to head in this life and what you're meant to learn and where your stretch zone is. And your south node is what you're bringing in from your past lives. So it's really your comfort zone, what you know, right, where you can add value and things like that. But that's why eclipses are a big deal, because they are always tapping into that energy of either collectively or in your chart, what it's fated, like it is a FATED event. So they always bring big shifts. They always illuminate something in our lives that we may not have seen before, because they always have to do with our luminaries, our sun and moon. And especially with lunar eclipses, there can be some releasing of old things that are no longer serving us, but also sudden departures of habits, but also maybe pets or loved ones. So their eclipse season is usually around 36 days. I think it ends on the 16th, so we're at the tail end of it. But the whole 36 days, I don't know how you guys have been feeling. Feel free to tell me in the comments, but like, it can be a lot. It can be intense. There can be a lot of changes. And I think it's okay to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. This is my cat's tail. During that eclipse season, it can be pretty intense. So what I wanted to do today is pull some cards with a perspective of using the solar eclipse in Gemini today. So anytime it's a solar eclipse, it's a new moon, which is usually when we plant seeds of intention, right? And because it's an eclipse and it's on the nodes of fate, that kind of superpowers the energy behind the manifestation. So when we're talking about how we can really tap into that energy of manifesting, it's in Gemini, which means that we're going to be looking at anything around Meowhead. Meowhead is my cat and she was biting me. But Gemini themes are anything around our mind, our thoughts, our communication, our connections to others. So when I think of Gemini, I think of what are you thinking about and who are you talking to? So definitely set some intentions around that area of your life. If you know where the Gemini house is in your chart, that'll also be really helpful to think about the themes around that house. But the card pool I want to do today is fun because if you're not super familiar with the houses, or even if you are, we'll tap into the energy of every single house. So we'll pull a card for each of the 12 houses, and then we'll talk about how that aligns for that area of your life, which is what the house is. So today I'm using the Prism Oracle. I wanted to keep it simple because we're going to be talking about the houses, and the messages are really clear when it comes to this deck. There's just one word on them. So if you have your own deck, then go ahead and pull along with me. I'll show you the spread that I'm going to use. But if not, this is the little guidebook for the deck that I'm using. And I'm going to set my intention to pull cards for all of you and this community, to see how you can best tap into that manifestation energy and make the most of the seeds that come with this solar eclipse. So I've shuffled the deck. I'm just going to knock on it to make sure that my energy and my intention is set in there. And what I'm going to do is turn this down so you guys can see. I know there's a little table there, but just ignore that. So what I want you to do if you're pulling with your own deck is to just pull out 12 cards in a circle. So each one of these is going to represent one of the houses. Move this over a little bit. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then I'm going to pull out from the bottom of the deck, the very bottom card, to just tell us what is hanging out in the ethers and what the overall energy is around this eclipse. And that's a really interesting card. Okay, so let's pop back up here. So when we're talking about the card for the first house, if you're pulling along with me, take a look at your card and see how it resonates with you. The first house is all about our identity and who we are and where we shine in the world. So looking at the card that we pulled for the first house, we have movement. To me, the first thing I think of is just the fact that everyone is moving a lot more, right? If we think about the last solar eclipse, people weren't moving around as much because of the things that were going on in the world. So if you think about how this relates to the group at large, whether that's this little community or everyone that we're seeing, like things are opening up, people are going out, and I think that's probably a piece of our identity that we have been missing over the past year and a half or so, and maybe just feeling a bit more of that like I am free to move around more, whether or not it's a physical or just feeling like you weren't able to. That is my interpretation of that movement card. Okay. For the second house, now the second house is related to finance. It's also our values. So what do we value in others and what do we value in ourselves? It's our self-esteem. And the second house is also related to manifestation, which is important because that's what we're here to talk about today. So if you're looking at your card for your second house, and I'll show you which one I pulled for all of us, it can either be a tip to show you where you can better manifest, or maybe showing you a block in your manifestation that you need to work on processing so that you can manifest what you want. So this one is really interesting. It's the disruption card. And I think that when we're talking about disruption, I don't know about you guys, but my first instinct is no thank you. But I have a lot of fixed energy in my chart, so I like things to stay the same. But I think if we think about it in terms of astrology or the world, like if you think about Silicon Valley, everyone wants to be the disruptor, right? They want to be the person who's doing something different so that they get the funding and so that they change the industry, right? So Uber was a disruptor, Warby Parker was a disruptor. Everyone's saying, oh, I want to be the Uber of astrology or whatever. That's now how they explain themselves in order to meet their goals or whatever. But I think in terms of looking at this from a second house perspective, it could be very literal in terms of kind of what we just talked about, business-wise or even in your career, right? If you just have a corporate job, you may want to be the one who's bringing the big ideas, the disruptive ideas to actually make a change. And that's in terms of the work aspect or the finance aspect of it. But if we're talking about manifestation, I think we get really stuck in the stories that we tell ourselves. Lucy, I know that we talked about that in the from the constellation this weekend. But because this eclipse is in Gemini and it's all about our thoughts and the stories that we tell ourselves, to me, I read this as, how do we disrupt those thoughts? How do we disrupt the patterns that we have been just in ourselves for so long so that we can actually get out of our own way and manifest whatever it is that we're calling in. And we'll see how that plays out in the rest of the cards. But I think disrupting the old order of ourselves is super important to be able to actually align our energy with what we're trying to call in. Okay, so the third house is all about communication. The third house is related to Mercury and Gemini themes. So this one kind of is a little extra important in this pull because it's tied into all of the themes that we're feeling with the eclipse, with Mercury in retrograde. And so it's communication, it's connection, it's short distance travel and like close learning. So it's not university learning, it's like high school, not lower education, you know what I mean. Basic elementary school, middle school, all of that stuff. And this card is growth, which I think is lovely. I think that this eclipse is definitely challenging in the areas that we just talked about with those Mercury themes and the cerebral themes. But even if we're tying it back to the disruption, that means that we're able to, if we actively choose to, disrupt our old patterns, become, manifest whatever we want to do to get rid of those old stories and thoughts. But I really like the sequence of this because that means that it'll lead to growth and we'll be able to actually stop telling ourselves those old stories and start telling ourselves new stories, right? That's the whole point of growth. Okay, so then we move to the fourth house. Do not be alarmed. The fourth house is the most private part of our charts. So it's, if you look at the circle in the 12 houses, it's the lowest point. If we're talking about a chart in terms of where the sun rises at our ascendant, it goes around the top half of the chart first and then the lower half. So the sun is at its lowest point when it's in the fourth house, and it's very private. It's everything that we bring into this world in terms of our family, our culture, our language, our religion, everything that we are born into unconsciously and that we grow into, right, as we begin to live in society and be in a family. So the card I pulled here is pain, which I think, that's why I said don't freak out. I feel like it's kind of like when you pull the Tower card and you're like, oh my gosh, everything's gonna crumble and destroy and everyone's gonna jump out of buildings. But I think if we, again, look at the previous card before, you don't get growth without pain. It's just, it doesn't happen. And, even when we're little and we're growing and we get growing pains, right? Our bones hurt because they're growing. And that's a good thing because we are filling into our bodies and literally embodying ourselves. So I think in terms of the context of the fourth house, especially if we're talking about manifestation and disrupting the stories and stuff, there's often a lot of pain for us when it comes to those deeper parts of ourselves and complicated relationships with our families and complicated relationships with what we call home. So working through that to get back to that third house card of growth is the goal, right? I was talking to Tanya actually earlier today, and we were talking about all the feelings that the eclipse is bringing up. And it's fine to be aware that the eclipse and the moon and all these things are stirring up feelings, but unfortunately we have to go through it. We can't just be aware of the feelings, we have to feel them in order to actually process them. Sometimes that can be painful. So that's the fourth house. So we move to the fifth house. The fifth house is the house of joy and creativity, fun, romance. It's where we create things. And for this one, we pulled the protection card. And the way that I read that is, after all of this disruption, growth, and pain that we've been through, I think we have to protect that part of ourselves that can be creative, that can have fun, that can just revel in life, right? Especially going back to the first house card of movement, we are feeling more free. We are feeling the ability to move around in the world and move around in space. And we may go through the disruption, we hopefully will go through the growth, and we may go through some of the pain, but if we're able to actually protect that part of ourselves that still is able to just laugh and celebrate and have fun, that I think that goes a long way. We definitely never want to lose that. Okay, so the 6th house, this is interesting. The 6th house is all about our daily habits and our routines. It ties into a lot of Virgo themes, especially around like mind-body connection. It can be our daily work, the daily people we work with. I'm going to say hi to Tanya again because I work with her every day. But the 6th house is the house of our daily life. I always mention this when I talk about the 6th house. It's also the house of pets because I love pets and animals. But the reason that pets sit in the 6th house is because our daily life revolves around them. We feed them at the same time. We clean their litter box. We change their water. We take them for a walk. All of that stuff. So I think that is like, I know I always say it because I love pets, but it just speaks to the point of the 6th house, right? It's what we do on a regular basis, and it's a habit. And again, it goes back to what are the thoughts that we tell ourselves on a regular basis? What's on a loop in our head? So the card we pulled for the 6th house is mystery. So as I interpret that, is maybe we need to let a little bit of mystery back into our daily lives. We're moving more, we're taking up more space, we're moving about in the world. I think all of our habits have become pretty ingrained as we aren't moving, or as we haven't been moving around. Everyone's working from home and everyone's staying in one city. So maybe we just need to explore what the mysteries are in our day-to-day life. Where are we protecting that space for the fun and the excitement? But where do we not have to have all the answers in our daily life, right? Where can we leave things up to being mysterious, like letting that be okay, that we don't know all the answers and we don't know how every minute of every day is going to go, and leaving space to manifest and let things to come in. I think I mentioned this in my newsletter a couple weeks ago, but there's a feng shui principle that says like to always leave a drawer open or a spot in your closet open to let the universe know and let the energy flow, so that something new can come in. And if you cram every single drawer and every single space in your closet, then there's no room for anything new to come in. So I see that playing out in the mystery card as well, because in your day-to-day life, if you have your whole day planned out, or it's crammed full of work or classes or whatever, you aren't leaving space for the universe to help you manifest and bring something new in. Okay, so the 7th house, I know I said don't freak out about the 4th house with the pain, and this one is like, yay. But the 7th house is all about our relationships. So it's often tied to romantic relationships and marriage, in the like stereotypical astrological sense. But it's really about how other people mirror us and how we can learn from our relationships with other people. So for this one, we pulled the abundance card, which is great. And I love that because I think it also ties into our 1st house of movement. And there's a polarity between the 1st and the 7th house. They're right across from each other in the chart. So the 1st house is who am I? And the 7th house is who am I in relation to other people? So when we're talking about these two together, I really like it because even visually, they kind of complement each other with these circles. It's almost like these are little slices off of that movement column. But gracias, Mommy. Yes, if you haven't signed up for my weekly newsletter, my momager here is reminding you that you can sign up for the constellation, link in bio. I think most of you already signed up. But if we're talking about the opposition between who am I versus who am I in relation to other people, we're able to expand our universe at this point, right? And move in space more and connect with each other more. And like, what else expresses abundance other than being able to see people and do things, and especially with the summer season, right? We can be outside, and summer really is the season of abundance anyway, right? We plant things in the spring and we watch them grow and we harvest them in the fall. So summer is really the time where everything is blooming. All of our vegetables are growing, our fruits are growing, our flowers are blooming. So I love this for the 7th house. Okay. The 8th house is also one that gets a lot of like, ooh, because because the eighth house is representative of really all the things that most people, unless maybe you have a lot of Scorpio in your chart, don't necessarily love to deal with. I guess the big three are like death, sex, and other people's money. It's really the house of taboo things, but it's also the occult. So it's anything that isn't necessarily visible to our eye. Thank you for all the hearts. And it's the depth of who we are. It's our not the private self, but it's the layers that we peel back to get to know ourselves on a deeper and deeper and deeper level. So for this card we pulled Strength, which I think is lovely. When we're talking about strength, well, I think everyone has had to develop it in a different way again because of the disruption that we had in 2020, right? We've all evolved to just live in a different world, right? The world has completely shifted, and that has taken a lot of strength on the part of everyone. It's been very stressful, it's been confusing, it's been scary at times. So I think just as a collective, we've built strength just through going through 2020. But I think in terms of the eighth house, there's a strength in being able to acknowledge the things that we don't want to see. And again, talking about the opposition, the eighth house is opposite the second house, so they have that polarity. And the second house is where we saw that disruption. So the way that I see this is that, yes, we're causing disruption in our thoughts and the stories that we're telling ourselves so that we can call in that manifestation. And then we're moving into that eighth house of spirituality and the direct connection to our deeper selves to have the strength to actually do the work, to actually call in what we're manifesting. So I think that's pretty cool, actually. Okay, the ninth house is the house that's usually associated with higher education. You know, I mentioned that for the third house. But when we think about higher education, it's really more about our worldview, our perspective, our philosophy on life. It's the house that is also associated with Jupiter. So it's about expanding our horizons. It's also about long distance travel, whatever that means to you. I always say that's relative, because for somebody who has always lived, you know, in one town for their whole life, like maybe traveling to another state is long distance travel. For someone who travels a lot for business, you know, traveling around the world might be long distance travel. But it's really about just how do you expand your knowledge of the world, your perspective of the world, and how do you remain open to learning kind of those big conceptual ideas that can shift your philosophy. I love this so much. It's trust. And I think that for me, trust is the whole gist of this whole process, right? So we've gone from movement to disruption, which is not easy, to growth, which is not easy, to pain, which is definitely not easy, to trying to protect that piece of ourselves that these comments are distracting me, to protect that piece of ourselves that can have fun and have lightness and be creative, to keeping the mystery in our lives, to creating abundance, to be strong, but really trusting the process, right? If we're going to look at our worldview and our philosophy of how we want to live our lives and how we want to align with our truth, which is another theme of this week's constellation, we have to trust. We have to have faith. My mom, who is sending all of these hearts and comments, has often told me that there's a really big difference between hope and faith. Hope is basically depending on someone or something else to make something happen. Like you're not in control. But when you have faith, it's just a knowing. It's an inner knowing that whatever is going to happen is going to happen for your greater good, or for whatever you believe. So whatever your beliefs, whatever your philosophies, whatever your spiritual practices, I think it's really about just trusting those. And again, the energy of this eclipse is very much about identifying with what your truth is, what's right for you, and knowing that we aren't meant to stray from that. We may have some disagreements in terms of our truth and aligning with others' truths, but I think what this is asking us in terms of our philosophy is to trust that our truth is right for us. What you feel in your gut, what you feel in your heart, is the way that you're supposed to move forward and the direction that you're supposed to move in. Okay. 10. Our 10th house is all about our career. Again, talking about the kind of stereotypical one-liner, it's about career, but really it's about our vocation. And a vocation can be career, but it's also your calling. It's what are you called to do in this life. So for our 10th house, we got energy. So I think if we're looking at this in the context of this manifestation spread and talking about our trust in our own truth, right? This is asking us to put our energy in the direction of what we want to do. What is our calling? So for me, it's astrology. I love astrology. Astrology is all I want to do all day long. And how I would read this for myself is if I trust that that is my truth and my calling, then for me, this is telling me to put my energy toward building my business and helping you guys and getting new clients and doing all of that stuff. So I think if you know what your calling is, if you know what your if you're happy in your job and all of that stuff, this is asking us to put energy into that direction. And if you don't know what your calling is, I would say this is asking you to put energy into figuring that out. The new moon eclipse is about planting seeds. So if you can take some time to think about what direction you want to go and think about what calls your heart, what lights you up, and actually like consciously direct some energy towards that. That's what I think will help you manifest for your 10th house. Okay, thank you, Dawn of Eons. Our 11th house is, again, the traditional description would be groups and associations. So the people around you who hopefully are supporting you. But the 11th house is, hi Jack. Also, it's the house of hopes and dreams. So I love that the house of hopes and dreams is also associated with the support that we can garner around it. Yes, our coven. It's who can really support us physically, mentally, spiritually, who we can talk to. You know, again, going back to Tanya, she said her friend just called her and was like, I just have to cry and like have someone listen to me. So that's what the 11th house is about. It's our community, but it's also our hopes and our dreams. So I love the sequence of these cards. Okay, I'm going to tell you what it is now because I just keep talking and talking. So it's reflection. So we just talked about for the 10th house, making time and space to reflect on where we need to direct our energy for our calling in life, right? And the 11th house right after that is telling us to actually reflect on that. What are our hopes and dreams? And reflecting on who can help us achieve them. So it's amazing how energy works, right? I'm just looking at how these have flowed so nicely for us all the way. And they continue to. Okay, so we're on our last card for the houses. I'm so excited. Okay, so the 12th house is similar to the 8th house in that people are like, ooh, what is the 12th house? I do not understand this. Because the 12th house is the end of the cycle, right? So we start at 1, we end at 12, great, everyone knows their numbers, and then we start all over again. But the 12th house is where the mysticism lives. The 12th house is where the ethereal lives. In like traditional, not like stereotypical, which is I've been referencing, but traditional is in like Hellenistic, like ancient Greek astrology. It's the house of like seclusion and it's like a sad house. It's like prisons and hospitals and stuff like that. But if we turn that on its head in terms of modern astrology, it's the house of retreat. It's the house of connecting to what is larger than us. It's the house of magic. It can be the house, like we can get lost in all of that for sure. Every house obviously has a higher frequency and a lower frequency. But if we're talking about the magical side of the 12th house, which we are right now because we're talking about manifestation, our card is intuition. And I'm just giggling a little bit because the flow of this whole 12 houses pull has been so aligned, right? Everything has kind of flowed into the other, and I love that so much. And I think that this is, I know we have an overarching card for the ethers, but in terms of wrapping up the cycle, I think this is telling us to, yes, all the circles, even in the card, right, Jack? This is telling us that we have to include our intuition for every single step of this manifestation cycle that we've been talking about, right? So from the movement to the disruption, to the growth, to the pain, to the protection, to the mystery, abundance, strength, trust, energy, and reflection. Making the space to listen to your heart and listen to your gut. And going back to our 9th house card of trust, letting yourself trust in your intuition so that you can actually align your energy to be able to manifest whatever you're looking at. So we have one more card. And again, this is the card that the deck is giving us what's in the ethers. What are we feeling about the overall energy of this whole pool? And I like it as a balance to the 12th card because it's determination, right? So we can't expect the universe to hand us anything. We can align our energy. If any of you follow Lacey Phillips' work, we have to align our beliefs, not just our thoughts, to whatever we're trying to call in. And to do that, you have to do the work. You have to process your trauma. You have to process the blocks that you might have, going back to that 4th house pain card, right? Like we have to work through the stuff in order to be able to create the space in the drawer to let the new stuff in. And you can't do that if you don't have determination and you don't put energy towards actually doing the work. So I think that it's a really lovely wrap-up card because you all wouldn't be here if you weren't interested in like how we can actually grow. And you know, maybe you're here because you want to learn how astrology can help you grow and become a better version of yourself, live your best life, all of those fun things. But none of that happens just by writing yourself that $2 million check and like hoping, right? So I think that we have to put in the work and we have to have a goal, and that's also tied into this new moon eclipse where we're planting seeds. Where do you want to go in the next year? Where do you want to go in the next 19 years? Eclipses always go in 19-year cycles. They also go in like many 1,000-year cycles, but we won't be around then. But really thinking about how you can be determined in setting your goals, be determined in following your intuition, being determined in how you trust yourself and trust your intuition. So that is all. That is our card pool. Here, I'll just flip the camera so we can all see the full set here. It's very lovely. And thank you all for joining. If you'd like to learn more about the houses, if you like have a general idea or you're new, beginner to astrology or beginner to maybe just learning how to read your own chart, I do have a free PDF at cosmicmoves.com/houses. And I still refer to it often just because it has like what the houses are and how to work with them, but also a cheat sheet of the keywords and the key questions for each of the houses. So check that out, go download it, it's super fun. Thank you all for joining me. It was so great to have all your energy, whether you're watching this live or the replay. You can sign up for my newsletter, The Constellation, if you haven't been reading the comments at the link in my bio. But I hope you all have a lovely rest of the eclipse day and take care of yourself, right? Like, the energy is really intense. I think we also have to remember that anytime there's an eclipse, it literally changes the magnetic field of the light that we're receiving on Earth. So it can affect us astrologically, emotionally, spiritually, but also physically. Like, our bodies may feel exhausted or wired or restless or whatever. So don't judge it, just feel it, have trust, take care of yourself. And I love you all and have a great day. Bye, everyone.